All right, so the final score in the Super Bowl was New England Patriots 13, Los Angeles Rams 3. And live from Atlanta, I'm delighted to say that Mike Carlson has decided to stay up and talk to us this morning. A very good morning to you, Mike.
Good morning. Yeah, as alive as I can be after refreshing myself down in the hotel bar when we got back finally from walking back from the stadium. It's a zoo out there in Atlanta, and it's amazing because it's a New England zoo. There are so many people wearing Patriots jerseys in the streets of Atlanta, and there have been ever since I got here. It was almost like a home game for the Patriots.
Yeah, I saw Kevin Clark of The Ringer last night saying there's almost no Rams in here. It feels like Los Angeles.
Yes, and maybe the Rams fans who flew to Atlanta actually flew out tonight before the game so they could beat the traffic home.
Potentially. I guess the first question I have to ask about the game is, what the hell was that? Was that the worst Super Bowl we've seen?
I enjoyed it, actually. Enjoyed's probably the wrong word, but I didn't think it was a bad game simply because it was always so close. And it was the kind of game where you're waiting for one big play that's actually going to turn it around. And I really thought at different points that the Rams were going to break it open. You know, when they made a couple of, they had two times in the second half where they started a drive, but they just couldn't keep it going. And I was convinced, you know, if McCourty doesn't catch up and bat that pass out of Brandon Cooks' hands in the end zone, it's a completely different game. And I would have been curious to see what happened. But there was some ferocious defense being played and some really great coaching. So I guess it's more as a purist that you'd appreciate that game. It wasn't a badly played game. It was a very well-played game by both teams' defenses.
And would you put that down to just brilliant defensive coordination, or was there a bit of slackness on the offense from both sides?
The Rams came out and played very well defensively. They adjusted after the first drive where the Patriots looked like they were going to do what they had done in the previous two playoff games. I think the main thing they did was to start having their three up linemen, Sue and Donald and Brockers, not to play the usual sort of straightforward holding your position going forward, but to slide side to side to ruin some of the Patriots' blocking angles, and that seemed to work really well. But they wore down as the game went on. On the Patriots side, I think the one thing that we probably should have anticipated but didn't. We're used to the Patriots trying to take away the other team's best weapon or two best weapons from a game. And in this game, they were able to do that, but they had actually decided the person they had to take away the most was Jared Goff. And I did say before the game, I thought they would play this a lot like they did with Phillip Rivers, and they did play it that way, although they blitzed more in this game. They had only really been sending 4 rushers for most of the time in the previous 2 playoff games, but they sent 5 a lot, and they played a lot of coverage, which was straight man-to-man, no covering safety behind the quarterback. And you would have expected a coach like Sean McVay would have been able to take advantage of that. And indeed, I think he actually did, but Jared Goff missed a lot of throws that he either didn't see because of pressure, or he rushed the throw because of pressure, or the one that was intercepted, he slipped, kind of backing up as he threw the ball. He was trying to back away from pressure. So I think the Patriots had a brilliant defensive plan, which they executed pretty well, but I was surprised that Sean McVay didn't adjust his offense more to try to cope. We didn't see the kind of screens and swing passes to Todd Gurley that you might see when a team is blitzing you a lot. And yes, the Patriots were sort of aligned to try to stop that. The tight ends, he only threw one pass to his 2 tight ends, and I thought they would become a bigger weapon in that offense. And as I said, Goff just never seemed to be able to get to a second read. If his primary read wasn't opened, he occasionally still threw that pass, and that was indeed what happened with the interception.
Right, so I guess that's a sign of a quarterback who is a little bit affected by the pressure, but it also sounds like there's a bit of blame to be had on Sean McVay's head and a little bit of blame on, I guess, the inexperience of Jared Goff.
Yeah, I think those things go together hand in hand. And the business with McVay manipulating Goff, while he's talking in his ear before the play, is somewhat exaggerated, but I think not completely, because I think Goff still isn't completely comfortable in what McVay would like to do. And there, he has to be able to see more of those things before the play, and more importantly, I think during the play, he has to be able to throw people open. But to do that, you need to be able to get to your second read or your third read to do that. When he's comfortable, he can do that. He sees the receiver as he comes open, but when he's not, he doesn't. He waits for the receiver to become open before he throws the ball. And he's got a good arm, but very few people have the kind of arm that can make that kind of throw consistently, because the longer you wait, the more time you're giving the defense to get back into position, and the more risk you're putting yourself at as a quarterback.
Sure, and of course the funny thing here is that with Tom Brady's first throw of the game, he threw an interception pass and he managed to recover from that, as we all expected him to do. What did you rate? How did you make his performance out to be last night? Was it one of these great performances where Tom Brady himself almost knew his limitations?
Yes, very much so, and it wasn't. I don't even think it was a great performance. He missed a lot of throws in this game that he should have made against a very good defense. But when they needed a score, he made two of the three best throws that he had thrown the whole game. The two to Gronk were both perfect throws, and he threw the one to Gronk, the second one into triple coverage, basically. There were three guys chasing Gronkowski, who still lumbers along like an old rusty tractor, whose engine needs repairing. But Brady threw it in, we always say things like, oh, where only Gronk could catch it. It wasn't where only Gronk could catch it. It was where only Gronk could make a play on it. Right. It wasn't like in his hands. He knew that Gronkowski would go forward for it. And then we saw a bit toward the end of the game that the Rams defense, like the Chiefs defense in the week, and the Chargers, had just got gassed, like the Atlanta defense in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. They'd been on the field too long, and they were just really starting to tire down in the front. And they're not a big. At the second level, the linebackers, they're not a big team. Their linebackers are fast, small, but not run-stopping pluggers the way you would want them to be. Littleton had a pretty good game, but it was funny. We said during the game on the first of that final drive for the touchdown, and Gronk's going up the sidelines. Gronk blocks him first and then gets away. And Littleton is so intent on holding him back that he fails to realize he could probably beat Gronkowski down the field to the point where he wants to do. So he could have kind of been in coverage otherwise. But this is going to go down, I think, as a boring Super Bowl. Certainly the lowest scoring, but it was a chess game to a big extent, and football is kind of like a chess match, except that you have live gladiators as chessmen. So that you can put everybody in the right positions and all, but if their pawn kicks your pawn over, when he's not supposed to, then you lose. But Belichick won that chess game, and I think the Patriots, just on points, kind of won the slugging match.
Yeah, it certainly seemed that way. It was kind of weird as well that after one of the great offensive seasons of all time, we get a Super Bowl like this. I guess we were due a game like this eventually in the off season.
Yeah, you remember when they beat the Chiefs 54-51, and I was on with you and Jer and said, this isn't the way the season's going to go. It's not the modern thing of football, and I just think it's fantastic after shutting out the Chiefs in the first half last week. They then come out and virtually shut out the Rams for the whole game. The 54-point team got 3 points against this defense, which, again, on paper, as I've said almost the whole season, just does not look like a great defense. But they play that way. And they're very well coached, very well disciplined, and the differences come up front in the playoffs, really. Maybe a bit in December, but mostly in the playoffs. They've just come out with a plan to generate pass rush on a team that doesn't have an outstanding pass rusher, not a star pass rusher. And you could see them working on that the last few games of December, and you saw it really clearly at the beginning of this game, where they would be on defense, they would be in this kind of like mill around, in a little concentrated triangle. And then as the Rams came out, they would then spread into whatever defense they were going to run, just to keep the Rams from seeing that. But all the time you saw them blitzing with extra players that they weren't expecting to come through spots and almost blocking. And both teams did this a bit, but the Patriots did it a lot. You have your rushers basically occupy the pass blockers so that another rusher can get by and find an alley. So it's almost like a running play in reverse. Right. And the Patriots did that really well in this game.
That's very interesting. So I guess from a Bill Belichick point of view, you've spoken about Sean McVay already. Defensively, it was a masterclass from the greatest coach of them all.
It really was. Gilmore was left pretty much to defend Cooks on his own for almost the whole game, and he did a pretty good job of it in the end. The play where Cook should have caught the touchdown, they were in a zone, and it was right after Chung had gone out, and whoever the central safety was in that zone went forward as Cooks ran by him to pick up someone else. You could see the blown assignment. There. But when you watched up front, they did really well until the point where Hightower went out for about 3 plays he injured his hand, and they really needed Hightower in there because he's kind of the brains of that defense when they're setting up. And it was a masterful performance. I thought the Rams defense played in almost as well. It's just they couldn't stop Julian Edelman. And then in the fourth quarter, I said this during the show, but I'll say it again because a lot of your audience wouldn't have watched it. I had the sense that somebody walked up to Gronk on the sidelines at the start of the fourth quarter and said, "Look, Gronk, this may be your last quarter of playing football. Let's do it." And it was like you saw still he was creaky, but you saw a bit of that old Gronk coming out there making those catches in the third. I do hope you took the under on this game, by the way.
We'll ask Ger when he's in tomorrow. I'm sure he had a bit of money on something with regards to the game. I do want to ask you about Julian Edelman before we wrap up. Obviously, MVP last night, probably key to the Pats' offense, many will say. But there's obviously a big question mark from my perspective looking at Julian Edelman because he missed the first 4 games of the season, Mike, due to a performance-enhancing drug ban. Does anybody care about this? Has it been spoken about much in the aftermath of the game, or is it kind of like everybody put on a smile and don't think about the idea that the MVP in the biggest game of our sport has served a drugs ban?
It's funny because Brady was MVP 2 years ago and he'd served the 4-match ban, although that was for not obeying Roger Goodell, and handing over his mobile phone. But I've seen a couple of tweets from people saying now if this were baseball, he wouldn't have been eligible for the postseason. Although I find that a little bit strange in the sense that if a guy is suspended and then comes back, you're suspending him again. And then it doesn't quite, I understand the reason for it, but it doesn't quite make that sense to me. In the NFL world, it went unmentioned. In fact, I didn't even think of it until after the game. In the euphoria of ending a bad game, but a very tight game. And in the end, I don't really think it's going to matter. I don't think people will think of that. It's funny with Julian Edelman too because he's such a good story in the sense of hard-working rags to riches, late draft choice, switches from quarterback to wide receiver, doesn't get much credit for a long time, not particularly, he's looked at as being sneaky fast, like most white receivers are in the game. And literally, the Rams had no way to stop him. At one point, they were double teaming him, and whoever had him at the line of scrimmage was literally just hanging on and waiting for help, and they still couldn't stop him. I would be really surprised if anyone puts that question to him.
Yeah, so would I.
I didn't watch the post match press conferences or anything like that. But I would be surprised if anyone pushed to it, because I think it's not so much that the country accepts it, although I think they do, but it's that the league doesn't want to talk about that. And
yeah, like it's not exactly a great message to be sending out, is it, that the MVP of the Super Bowl has served a drugs ban to people who, may be in a position to consider this sort of thing, that this guy did it. Not only did he get away with it, he's been awarded with the biggest individual award on the biggest stage in our biggest game in America.
Yeah, that's I'm sure we'll get that take. It's like, well, if that's what Edelman can do, then everyone else ought to go out and do some steroids in the summer and take the first 4 games off, and you come back fresher and play better in the second half. The contrary argument will be, which you hear a lot in other sports as well, as he's just trying to get better and he made a little mistake, and went too far and he's learned his lesson. I'm the kind of person that says once you're punished, that should be it. You do your time and then that should be over, and you should get your second chance at it, at whatever you're doing. So I'm not that bothered by it, but in an abstract sense, it does put a little shadow over the game.
Mike, that's pretty much all I got time for. Before we wrap up, I must ask you about the big battle last night, Maroon 5 versus Travis Scott versus Big Boy. Who came out on top at halftime?
I'd like to say I bothered to watch it, but I would say that the undisputed champion of it was Gladys Knight, and I just wish that they had left all those people in the car park and let Gladys Knight do the halftime show all by herself, because I think it would have been better. Her national anthem was one of the best ones I've heard in years, probably the best one since Aretha Franklin at the Hearns fight. And I should point out too that if you do come to Atlanta, there's a bar called Rira, where I watched the Ireland-England match, and it's a nice Irish bar, which is good because I needed stuff to drown my sorrows after that match.
I think we've all been drowning our sorrows for the last 48 hours. Mike Carlson, thanks so much for all your coverage during the season, and go enjoy that sleep tonight.
Okay, thanks, guys. Anytime. Next season, whatever.